Hello, everyone. Welcome back to From the Ground Up. My name is Carmen Milagro. I'm a certified CBD educator. I'm also the author of The Truths About Hemp CBD, a guidebook for curious folks. And I'm the founder at Divina Skincare and Botanicals. And you're probably wondering, why am I doing these shows? Well, part of it is because I think it's really important that we get to know other people and their experiences, and they share their stories with us about how they built whatever it is that they built, their companies, their strategies, their life strategies, their wellness strategies. And what I like to do with this platform is to share that wisdom and that knowledge for those of us that are starting out. Some of us are in the middle, some of us are reinventing ourselves. So I believe you can never have too much knowledge and too much information. And our guests are always willing to share that with us. So that's where this all comes to. The bottom line is, on the show, we ask the questions about work-life balance. Does it really exist? Does it work? What does it mean to each guest? And we're on the quest to find out these stories. And I have different guests from all walks of life and different arenas, from tech gurus like today's guest to artists and musicians and authors, real estate investors, you name it. So we're getting the whole gamut. That's part of the plan. We do want to find out, of course, are some of these things truly possible, or are some of us just a little crazy to try to attempt it? Today's guest is Mr. Alex Clark. He's a technology entrepreneur, to say the least. He was the co-founder and chief software architect at BitStew Systems, which was acquired by GE Digital. He's a leading expert in big data technologies and a business leader known not only in Silicon Valley, but in British Columbia. And he's currently the CEO at Quantum Pigeon. It would help if I pronounce things properly. But we want to learn all about that today. So I'm going to introduce you and welcome you. There you are. Alex, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
We want this to be really, entertaining and fun for all. So are you ready?
I'll do my best. I've had lots of coffee. It'll be energetic.
Okay, good. And I promise we won't break out into any song or dance or anything like that.
That is for the benefit of your listeners. That would not be good.
Okay. I don't know. We'll see. And Alex, for the context of our viewers and our listeners, because we do both podcast and the video system, let's start with this question. I'm always curious about, when people go into their industries and they're building their dream projects and all of that, but what were they like when they were young? So my question to you is, what was 18-year-old Alex Clark like, and what was the deciding factor or the person that got you into this path in technology?
18-year-old Alex was pretty boring. I was never a wild kid. I was always pretty well behaved, had a strong sense of discipline, and for me, duty and virtue and truth and all that kind of stuff that might seem kind of weird for the time. I was never particularly rebellious. And I remember at one point, I was 13 years old, and my dad said to me at one point, "I wish you'd act more like a 13-year-old and less like a 40-year-old." So I was always kind of a mellow, responsible guy.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you. I actually really enjoy this response from you. I was like a bookworm. I was in art, all of that, and pretty quiet, believe it or not. I hardly ever talked back then. And here I am doing this. So
yeah, it's funny where life takes us.
Yes, it is. And how was it? Was there a defining moment or a pivotal moment where you said, wow, this is it. This is my world?
Yeah, there kind of was. My original path was very different than tech. And that's maybe kind of odd growing up in Silicon Valley, but for me, I wanted to be a cartoon animator. I like to draw, and I liked Looney Tunes cartoons, and my hero was Chuck Jones. Chuck, I think it was, I'm not. I hope I'm not getting the singer confused with the animator, but I think it was still Chuck Jones. Two Chuck Joneses, anyway. And that's where I wanted to go. But what was happening during that time period was animation was being more and more digitized.
Right.
So what I wanted to do then was, all right, well, if that's going to not be something for me, maybe I can get into something like aerospace engineering, because I liked space and all that stuff. And I really liked learning about astrophysics, at least at a high level. So that had kind of been a shift. And for some reason, I don't know if it was intentional, or I sort of avoided computers and technology. And maybe it was because around me in Silicon Valley, it was kind of the thing everybody was doing, especially later in the 90s and 2000s. And so I briefly went to university for aerospace engineering and loved the technical side. Didn't like the government swings and projects. There's feast or famine before the privatization of aerospace. So it just kind of hit me at one point. Hey, dummy, you like the technology. You've been doing computers for a long time as a hobby. It's everywhere in your industry. Why aren't you in this space?
But right, sometimes we have to explore other options before we come back to who we are supposed to be. And that's what youth is about.
I think it's a good thing. I think how fortunate for those who know exactly what they want to do right away, pick the right thing and just run with it. But there's value in knowing what you don't want to do.
Yep, exactly. Well, now, okay, so now you're in it. So tell us about your journey with BitStew. I mean, that was a big undertaking, from what I understand.
Yeah, I think any business really is, I guess. You sort of pour your heart and soul into it. BitStew started, I always knew at some point I wanted to have my own company. It was just something that always interested me. So when BitStew came around, it wasn't, and this is my philosophy on starting companies for myself anyway, it wasn't a matter of, gee, it's time for me to start a business. What am I going to do? It has to be born out of a need. And so with BitStew, I was working at another startup, and I recognized a problem that they had, a deficiency in finding a certain type of software to help support their business. And after looking around a long time, I thought, well, gee, maybe I can just create it. And since nobody else has it and we need it. So I created it, a very quick prototype over a weekend. And it did well for the company, supporting what they needed. But after about a year, it sort of reached the end of its usefulness. And that's when I decided, well, what if I take a step back and actually build a proper version of this and make it as robust as it needs to be? And so I spent a year on nights and weekends building it out on my own. And that became the early foundation for BitStew. And that company became the first customer. They were the ones that I went back to, my boss at the time and said, hey, I think I found some software that meets our needs. But I didn't want to mention that I did it because I wanted it to succeed on its own merit, not because they knew me. And so I said, I don't have time to look at it. Maybe we can get the team to check it out. And they did, and they liked it. And the CEO, to his credit, after he found out it was mine, I said, look, I did it on nights and weekends on my own computer. So I give it to you for free. I just wanted them to sign the license agreement saying it was mine and not challenge it. And to his credit, he said, no, you did the work. We will buy a proper license from you, come up with some pricing, and became the first customer.
That's excellent. That's like, well, I mean, of course you put in all that work, but it is the hard work that gets you to that point, right? That pivotal point. And then what was your so you build the company, you get, you're in discussions with GE, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get acquired. And what was your life like after that point? I mean, you worked, so how many years was that?
It was 11 years. Yeah. Okay. Start to finish was 11 years before it actually got acquired.
Right. And then what? Then what happens when you're doing all this work in your, that entrepreneurial life, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's nights and days and weekends and 24/7 and all of that. So,
I think for me, it was a surprise what happens after that. So I always had goals for myself and a career trajectory. And I'm very much the type of person to set and measure by that. So I knew I wanted to be, when I was just starting out in software, I said, oh, someday I want to be able to be a developer. I was testing software. I want to be able to write software. And then, okay, I want to be a senior engineer. And then I want to be a team lead, and then an architect, and then chief architect, and then chief technology officer, and then start my own business. And I had set a goal that I wanted to be able to do all that before I turned 40. And the part that I wasn't ready for is what happens if you do it? Then what? Right. And then suddenly, I'm not even 40, have the ability to retire. Every goal in that sense that I set was
right.
done, and I didn't have anything beyond it. And so you almost come to a little bit of a existential reckoning, I guess, which is working so hard for a goal can be rewarding, but it can also be a crutch to where you don't stop, reflect, and ask yourself really important questions that everybody should ask themselves, which is, what do I want out of life? And when you pour yourself into work, as I did, it can almost be an unintentional avoidance. I'm doing something that fulfills me, I feel good, but what do I really want out of life? And when that business sold, I was faced with that question head on, and it caused a bit of discomfort and anxiety as I had to really ask those tough questions. All right, now what?
And there's only so when you were acquired, it was was it 200 million?
Yeah, just a little bit over 200 million.
So now your life, you think, right? A lot of people think, well, shoot, with that kind of money, I'm just going to lay out in the beach somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think, and I suspect that this is probably the case with most entrepreneurs, that especially if you love what you've done, that might get a little maybe boring, a little old, annoying. What were some of those feelings?
It was great for about 6 months. Sitting in a pool floaty, sipping martinis at like 2 p.m. is fantastic to decompress after 11 years of really nonstop, for me, stress. I have the personality. I got asked this question once at BitStew when I was finally able to have a bit of reputation for the company and started getting more senior or experienced talents applying for jobs. And I remember one lady was, I think she was applying for the VP of operations role. She was really accomplished. And I remember sitting in the interview going, wow, why, this person is interviewing for a job at my little company here. How do we get here? That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But she asked me a question. She said, do you ever stop and reflect about how far you've come and how, much success has been there? And my answer was, no, I don't. I only see what's broken and what's going to kill me next. What is the next fire to put out? All the stuff that works, I ignored. And I don't know that that's a good thing, because when I give advice to others, which I'm not always so good at taking my own advice, but when I give advice to others, I suggest they be mindful of, okay, yeah, you had one setback or you had one challenge, but look at where you've come and appreciate just how much you've built. And that is a little bit of a hard thing. And so when you're in a startup mindset like I was with that, all I saw for 11 years was what was going to kill me next. What was the problem? So it was always constant, like high energy, a bit of stress. So when all that came away and the sale happened, it was nice to be able to almost decompress and detox from all that for about 6 months. I ended up being semi-retired for about 2 years, because I was on contract with GE to stay on, but they were going through some of their own internal reorganization. And I kept showing up saying, hey, I'm here if you guys need me. And they said, well, we like it when founders stay around. It's good for optics, but don't really worry about anything. So I guess I'm going to keep floating. And after a while, I think if you, yeah, and I think it's like you said, if you have that mindset that likes problem solving, likes building, it's going to get pretty old sitting and floating for a while.
I suspect that is the reason why, and we're going to fast forward to now. I suspect this is why why am I just struggling? QP was born.
QP is perfect. In fact, we changed all the branding and the naming to QP anyway, just to make it a lot easier.
Oh, thank you. So tell us about this project, because of course, the whole point of all of this is that a lot of times we as creators, right? And as an artist, I assimilate a lot to the entrepreneur. I call myself an entrepreneurist for this reason, is I love creating something out of nothing. And I do have to thank you for the reminder that you just gave me, because that's all I've been doing on my startup. Is all I see is all the things that aren't going well. And you're right, we must reflect on, wow, I've gotten this far on my own. This is, well, with some coaching, of course. But I've gotten to this place, I mean, when I saw you in December at the event that we were at, even from just that 2 months ago, it's been a huge forward leap, and I hadn't focused on that. So thank you for that. But getting back to you, tell us about QP.
Yeah, so QP came about one of those pool floaty sessions. And after I sold BitStew, I got a bit of local press in British Columbia because it was a fairly good sized exit for at the time. And so some people have heard of me, and they would come up to me and ask me if we'd want to do a business together. And some people had really good ideas, but for me, I couldn't, if I wasn't going to be passionate about something and do it every day, I just couldn't really get involved. I don't think I would add enough value. So I give advice here or there, but to really put my name on something, it has to be born of a need and not of a, hey, I just don't want to be bored anymore, right? And QP kind of came to me almost by accident. So I was messaging with people, and the problem with messengers out there, since they were all based on SMS 14-ish years ago, I think, they're all bound to your phone number, and your personal information was out there. And the leader and all that stuff, Facebook, for example, wasn't very good at protecting privacy and respecting people's privacy. Right. So, we all know that now, and they've had their internal memos leaked and really just showing the extent of it. But at the time, I think this was 2017, it was known, but it wasn't as popular as it is now. Mm-hmm. And what I didn't like was that I would message in a group, and then people would find my information, say, oh, hey, I saw you in there and know you sold your company. Have I got a business idea for you? And I'm like, why don't I have this privacy? And then I started really reflecting on why is it that technology is the way it is with respect to communication. It hasn't really evolved beyond SMS for the web. And that's what started QP, was really to be a better way to connect people and communicate through technology and fix those issues. Where it evolved from there, because we had a foundation of privacy and we could do things that other apps couldn't do, really it then became an outlet for not only communicating through, say, messaging, which we're familiar with, but also through our creativity. And then also putting value and access to ourselves. And that's what it then evolved to. So QP became a social media app that, if you took the best of existing social media like Instagram, TikTok, and so forth, and mix that with ability to access people through WeChat or WhatsApp or Telegram or others like them, and merge it all together and really put the power back to the creator. And one of the reasons I think I was successful at BitStew was I created a platform where I just got out of people's way. So what BitStew did was, it was technology that allowed use artificial intelligence to analyze industrial data, but then allowed the people that knew the business to be creative, create their own rules, create their own analytics, and do their own discovery. So we created a platform that was useful but got out of everybody's way. And I always believed that if you just gave people something, they would do more creative things than you could ever imagine. And maybe it's because I never thought of myself as a particularly creative guy in that sense, and I always was impressed by those who were. And that was really the promise and the power of social media in the beginning, that it sort of lost its way. And that's what I want to bring back. So someone like yourself and others who have this creative expression and have value and access to themselves. And if somebody wants to reach you, why do you have to give up your privacy? And why do you have to operate in a model that's so broken, where you do the work, the creativity, set everything up, make the connections, gain the knowledge, and then somebody else takes all the money? It makes no sense. It maybe made sense in the early days of social media, but now that we've seen what it is, it's really time to focus the attention and enable the success of the people who really build it. And those are the people who create the content and have the knowledge, not the platforms that run the software and sell your information to the highest bidder. That's just fundamentally wrong. And we're seeing that.
Well, there's a lot of discussion, right, with this American Innovation and Choice Online Act. I know that I have another friend in technology, which is kind of crazy. As you already discovered, I am not a techie person, but being born and raised in the Bay Area, I was, privy to a lot of conversations at the beginning of all of this, back in the, .com boom. I know I'm really dating myself, but that's when it was happening. And I have a lot of friends who were teaching me about what was going to happen in the future. And a lot of people didn't believe them, the privacy issues, just they didn't believe it. They just thought this was so wonderful and great. And I was taught, remember when you're signing up to all these different platforms like Facebook, you are basically giving them all your rights. And at least knowing it allowed me to navigate it the way I wanted to, I feel, the way that I needed to as an artist. So on social media, the artist exists on social media. That's how I chose to sort of semi protect myself. But it seems like there's a lot of conversation, especially with this new privacy discussion and some of the messaging that's being told to us from the big guys like Google. Do you have any thoughts on how they're addressing, or how they're, I guess the better word is how they're trying to mislead us by these memos that we're getting?
The big players in this space are in a bit of a tough spot right now. And it's hard for me to look back now to when they started and be critical, because it was a new space. And when you're pioneering a new space, you don't necessarily get it right, and the space has to evolve. And that's the challenge. Are they evolving, and can they evolve is really the bigger question. Because you look at, let's take Facebook as the example, because it was really the first. Well, there's MySpace and Friendster, but we can say Facebook just to keep it simple, because they're the one that ultimately won in that space. When they started, they were going out to college campuses, and they were all about connecting your inner social circle. They were saying, hey, go share your activities with your classmates, then your family, and then this inner social circle. Let's bring everybody together. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but a problem naturally comes out of that, which is, well, okay, how do I make money to keep the business running? And, so the answer was, well, ads. Okay, fine. Nobody really understood the darkness that would bring that model going forward. And it's hard to, perceive that until you've actually done it.
Sure.
I think they call those wicked problems. The definition of a wicked problem is you don't know how to solve it until you've actually tried to solve it once, and then you have to do it again. But so let's take the evolution of social media to understand where they are, and then what they have to do to get out of there, and even if they can. So they start selling ads on this model of connecting our inner social circle. But then in the evolution of the technology and society's use of it, we had the rise of other platforms like Vine and Instagram, which did something different. They encouraged us to connect outside of our social circle. So no longer was I watching what my friends were doing and connecting with them. I was finding complete strangers who were posting really cool pictures or doing amazing things, and I wanted to connect with them. And I wanted to explore that more. And that really gave rise to the influencer and the content creator as a thing.
Mhm.
And nobody saw that really coming. And then what happened was, as the power shift came from this platform where I'm just sharing pictures of my lunch to my friends, to I'm now having these people who are becoming celebrities and have influence over society,
Mhm.
I'm then using, well, they were then using that same antiquated model of, well, let's just use ads. And again, not necessarily so dark in the onset, because if you liken social media to a TV and media platform,
Right.
and that's often what I do, is I say, okay, to understand where it's going, let's take principles from the past. Social media and television are kind of the same evolution, which is they were both platforms to express creativity. And just like the Nielsen ratings that rated a TV show on how many watchers it had, and then advertisers came in and paid higher dollars to get those eyeballs, social media did the same, but they did it with likes and followers. And these creators rose up to be true celebrities, and these channels were suddenly getting millions and millions of views. And the big social media companies, in a response to that, said, hey, we've got faster and faster computers that can store more and more data about everything. So let's go track everything. Let's go throw artificial intelligence against it, learn stuff, and see what happens. Well, what happened? Well, in an effort to sell more commercials, they needed more eyeballs. The stories that got more eyeballs were these scandalous stories that spread fear. They spread not necessarily the truth, because if something was sensational that spoke to an innate fear that people had, that can go back to what, society and accelerations of technologies and a whole bigger topic. But basically, it spoke to a very real fear that was going on, and people clicked it more. And the algorithm didn't stop and say, wait a minute, if we keep feeding lies and misinformation and controlling the content that's out for the benefit of more ad revenue, that's a bad thing, because we are allowing misinformation, which gets clicked on 7 times more. And I hope that's not misinformation on my own part, but I think that's the number I remember being, more, let's just say, than the truth, because the truth is often very simple and very harmless in society. And life is often better than we think it is, and kind of is okay. But that doesn't get you clicks. It's the big sensational stuff that gets clicks, and people believe it. And then you have people manipulating it because they want more clicks. So I'm going to have a credible person come on who's an expert. Maybe is, maybe isn't. And you're going to feed that misinformation more and more. So then what happens? The big giants go, hey, we're getting more eyeballs, more ad revenue, more money. Cool. Now that more money means we can continue the cycle and exploit more. So the more data I collect, the more money I make, the more I can exploit. And it gets into this really dark negative feedback loop. And then people like yourself who are posting content to your followers, you're going, wait a minute, I'm posting, but my followers aren't seeing it anymore. I'm not in control, because they took over the algorithm that decides who sees your stuff when, because again, they don't you're not really their customer. I mean,
Right.
they're very smart and they're very good at making their customers happy. But when the customer is the advertiser, not you, you're the product. So they're going to shuffle the product around that gets their customer the best experience. And this is the negative feedback loop that happened to create this really dark place that we're in. And we can see it now with all this news that's coming out on the big social giants, the drops in their stock prices, the impacts that, and the pushback that the younger generations are having, that are kind of sick of this flow, because their business model is fundamentally flawed, because their business model doesn't serve the greater good of the people that make them successful.
And there's a lot of, thank you for that, because that really, I think you just sort of described it so beautifully and articulated it. But it also is parallel to a lot of other industries. This isn't the first time. For example, the music industry, it's the same thing. Like, this is why, in my opinion, this is why you get so many artists that all sound the same, because it's that same model that the music industry has used for so long, and that the independent artist has had to try to battle, and it's impossible for the indie artist to battle against this. So it's not that we haven't experienced this before. It just seems that we just don't really learn. And so here we are. We have people like you who are taking on these. This is a giant undertaking. So thank you.
Yeah, it's maybe I should have stayed floating in a pool, but it is a big undertaking. But it's one that I'm very happy to be taking on, because somebody is going to make it right. Somebody in the natural evolution of society's use of social media and expressing creativity. Where now, back in the TV analogy, you needed a production studio, some very expensive equipment, and a team to produce content that people watched, and you need connections with executives and at networks. Now everybody just needs a cell phone, and it's pretty much free. That has unleashed a tremendous amount of creativity, some of it good, some of it bad.
Yes, of course.
But, I think the best thing we can do, and certainly what we're trying to do at QP, is provide a platform that doesn't try to take control and allows people to express their creativity as they would have naturally, and not manipulate the creativity that's out there. And that's the key. If we prop up the creators and they are our true customers and we make them happy and we're good at making them happy, they will create amazing things. And I think overall society will start to benefit from the promise of social media instead of being trapped in the dark side of it in the pursuit of bigger profits. So if our success comes from the people's success versus the advertiser and the corporate success of others, I think everything's going to work itself out. And if we don't do it, somebody else will. And we're right now the furthest along, and I think from what I've seen in the best position. But if we don't, someone will.
Well, thank you for leading the charge. We're going to switch gears a little bit. I know that you've got a busy day ahead, and I do want to wrap this up. And I appreciate so much you being able to explain this to me in a way that I could understand it is valuable to me, and I know that there's others like me. But we're talking. There's a lot of what we talk about on the show about the balance of life, and we touched on it. You exited out of your first major build, you took some time off, and you're building another. So has it been your experience, or do you have some advice on how is it possible, first of all, in your opinion, to have a life balance? And if so, how did you achieve that?
So have I achieved it? I probably haven't achieved it. So that's fair enough there.
Okay.
I'm going to say it's possible, and maybe it's possible by people better organized than me. They can get things going more. I do believe for a lot of people, and myself included, that to achieve a certain level of what you're trying to achieve, you maybe have to be out of balance for a while. And there are always points when you can be in an unhealthy state. And if you have the ability to kind of recognize it and say, look, this is not my life for the next 10 years. I will grow this to be a self-sustaining entity without my level of involvement I have now. But also in the beginning, there is a certain commitment required, at least perceived on my side, that you have to be out of balance for a little bit to then get to the balance you want. That has been true in my life. Maybe there are those who are more efficient at running things and they're like, nah, I can just work 8 hours a day and chill out. But I have not personally reached that. But I also don't think it's a bad thing because I'm aware of it, and I know it's not the long term purpose to be out of balance. It's okay. I'm not in balance right now, but it's necessary, and we're going to build this up to be where it is to where I can be a bit more in balance.
Right. And I think the pendulum swings, whatever way it needs to, depending on your level of commitment, like you said, depending on where you are in the process, even depending on, where you are in life, I think. So it's different for everyone. I've talked to quite a few people now, and everyone has a different answer. And that's why I love asking these questions, because I do believe in, what I'm doing right now. I do believe that, health, emotional, spiritual, physical health, it's all a part of the package for when you're building something from the ground up, whether you've done it before or you're doing it again. I wonder if you have maybe 3 tips that you yourself turn to when you've recognized that it's time to slow it down. Maybe are there certain things that you do personally that allow you to just sort of swing it back the other way?
Yeah, I'll try to give 3, but it's under one single umbrella. And that is, you talked about health, and I think that's incredibly important. In my early days, before I even started my own company, but I was in my 20s, and you doing that kind of working for a tech startup and doing like a 36-hour day. That was the longest day I did. That's a long day. And there have been times I've done all-nighters trying to get something out. And I think every time I spend 2 weeks fixing the garbage I created because I was so tired. So that's a really important lesson, that when you want to operate efficiently, you can't look at single days. You need to look at longer time horizons, whether it's weeks, months, quarters, or years that make sense for your business. So if I want to create a successful company and I want to operate as efficiently as I can, I need to sleep, I need to eat well, I need to exercise. And every once in a while, we talked about, sometimes I'm out of balance, but I still recognize that a break and just vegging or going to a beach somewhere or taking a vacation is part of the overall strategy for how to operate at a high level for a long period of time.
Right.
If you tell somebody to run 100 meters, they can sprint as fast as they can, and that's fine. You tell somebody to run 5 kilometers and they sprint out 100 meters, they're going to be walking the rest of it. For how quickly you want to operate and how efficiently you can go. And part of that requires you then to go back into a state of, I guess you could say, balance, but at least taking care of yourself. And I've exercised my entire life since I was 13 years old, because I knew that if you had a healthy body, ate well, slept well, your mind would be better and you would solve problems more efficiently. And so for me, if I were to let that slide, then over the long term, over the course of years, I'm not going to be as good as I could be. And I need all the help I can get.
Right. Thank you. We all do.
Exactly.
Alex, I have sort of what I call just my rapid fire, quick questions right off the top of your head, and you don't have to answer if you don't feel like it. It's okay. But sort of like that whole, let's get to know you on a different level. And so some of these questions might be a little bit nutty. I'm going to try to just pick, I have a whole bunch here, so I'm going to try to pick the ones that I haven't yet asked. What brings you the greatest joy?
That's hard to do that one on rapid fire.
Oh.
I think what brings me the greatest joy is being as true to myself and as honest with others as possible.
Oh, that's a good answer. I love that one. Okay, this one's not so tough. What's your favorite snack?
Oh, it's going to depend. But it depends on mood, but it's probably going to vary between salty and sweet, but will most likely involve, I love chocolate.
Ooh, okay, something else we have in common. Okay, this one might be a little bit more thought-provoking. If you could go back to 18-year-old Alex, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give 18-year-old Alex?
Stress less and have more fun. And what I mean is, I think for me, for quite a while, and still even to this day, there's this worry: will it be okay? Am I making the right decisions, and will everything be okay? The answer is generally, for most people, yeah, it's going to be all right. You make decisions in the moment with the information that you have. Most of the time, it will work out. And if it doesn't, don't worry too much about it. Just learn from it and move forward. It's all going to be okay.
I love it. That sounds like the last words of advice. That's perfect. I do appreciate so much that you've taken the time to do this with me today. And I have one question for you. Are you a hemp CBD user?
I tried because I have been working out for a long time. So my joints sometimes tend to feel it. I used to teach martial arts, and that involved a lot of joints stresses.
Yeah.
It just didn't really, for me, seem to work. And if I ever tried it, I was not really a good responder. I just didn't particularly feel it.
Okay. Well, everybody's different, but I would like to send you some for you to try. I happily
will try it. I will happily try it and
Okay,
see.
great. Thank you so much.
Thank
And do
you.
you have any last words for everyone that's will be watching and listening and just anything in general? Just an Alexism.
Oh, and Alexism. Don't forget to have fun. Whatever
Okay.
you're doing, just don't forget to enjoy it.
I like that. And I've had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really, really, truly appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Good. I'm glad you had fun too. Thank you so much, Alex. I'll be in touch. I'll connect with you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for staying with us tonight on this episode, this webisode from the ground up. I I really I don't know if you can tell, I really enjoy talking to people and I love sharing stories, just like I love sharing music and writing and all of that. This brings me joy. So thank you for allowing me to continue to do this. And I will continue to do it as long as I can. This all started from being locked up, during the first part of this pandemic and being isolated from everyone that I knew. And I taught myself how to do this, which is a huge, huge accomplishment. Those of you that know me, you know. So thank you again for staying with me. It's pretty much a wrap. I have such tremendous gratitude to Mr. Alex Clark for joining me today and for really breaking it down for us of what he's building and why, and the passion and the reason and the, just the idea of doing something good in the world. And I hope that we all can put in our little grain of rice for that. Thank you, everyone. As I've said before, I appreciate you being here. My name is Carmen Milagro, and this has been From the Ground Up. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.